thank you for watching my YouTube channel. This is my new tutorial. It's a little black kitten in a snowfall playing, let's say. This is a very simple painting, also quite short. I choose it because I still can show a lot of tricks, so I hope it will be very useful. The snow part is last on the end, and I think I overdid a little bit, so you don't need to do that if you don't want, or just probably add less salt. It will be better, I think. So I hope you join to me. Regarding the materials and tools, it's very similar to my other video about materials and tools I use, so I'm not making a separate video on it, but I just explain what was it here. So I had Archie's watercolor paper, 18 by 24, but here you really can go 14 by 20 or 16 by 20 if you have smaller ones, but don't go smaller, I don't suggest that. I used lump back watercolor, masking fluid with a stick, water bottle, spray bottle I meant, and I used probably a larger size round brush and a smaller size round brush, but when I'm doing it I will tell you exactly what I'm using, so if I skip something I will bring it up in the demonstration part. So I think that's all. And here is the photo what I used. You can see it's on my painting the snow is a little bit overdone, so be careful with the salt. So it will be basically a wet on wet technique, and I'm starting with a watercolor pencil, basic gray, whatever light color you have, like gray, brown, light blue will work, I think, or even other colors, because if you're not pushing too hard the pencil on a paper, you can wash it off easily when you wet the paper. This will be a wet on wet technique, so we will start with the wet paper, and at that point when you use the big flat brush, most of the watercolor pencil mark will disappear. So the first task is to outline the cat. I will use masking fluid because I wanna label like whiskers and stuff, so actually that's why I'm doing the outline. It's not necessary otherwise, but you need to know where you wanna put the masking fluid, so actually that's the reason why I'm doing this little drawing, because I wanna know exactly where the whisker will be. When you're doing the outlining, I think what is important is to get the ratios right. So you're looking the lines and their direction and their size compared to each other. If you're unsure, you can use your pencil to make measurements that, let's say this line is this long, and compared to that this one is 2.5 times bigger or smaller, so you can kind of get the ratios right that way. The outline don't need to be precise at all. This painting is about using the watercolor on wet paper, so wet on wet technique, and generating good first texture where you need to have and not generating fur texture when it's just not make sense. So it's really not about a precise outline. Just get the main parts ratios right and like position the eye, because if you do my way you will use masking fluid there, so it will be really defined right away, hard to change afterwards. I'm changing the tail because I don't like when a cat don't have visible tail, it just look weird, look like a bunny, at least in my eye. So when you think you have a decent outline, get the masking fluid. Mine is PBO drawing gum, and I'm using a reed stick to apply. The reed stick was introduced in the Tools and Materials video. So since then I used a chopstick, which I made, one side made the tip more sharp, not very sharp, just sharp enough to draw lines, and it's working awesome, absolutely awesome. So you don't need the reed stick, you can make so nice thin line. If you're unsure, practice with it. Maybe not the first line, because it can be drippy the first line after you stick into the masking fluid, but just take a piece of any kind of paper, it don't need to be watercolor paper, just any paper, and test it out where you get the right line. I draw the whisker and the ear also. The ear is really reasonable because you don't want like spread into the paper around the ear, because it will leave a little color for sure, and it's okay around the back or a tail because it's fluffy, but around the ear it just look like weird dirt because it's so defined on the animal, it don't have fluff on it. So when you're done with the masking fluid, make sure, absolutely 100% sure it's dry. Don't start to paint because you will destroy your brush and everything, and the paper and your work. So when the masking fluid is dry, spray the paper, and I usually use many big bowl of water around me. The bowl, I really suggest use transparent or white bowls because you want to see how the water is getting dirty, and you don't want to work with, absolutely don't want to work with dirty water. So then I use this big flat cheap no-name brush, and I just make the wetness even, and I right away start to work on this ash or ashes paper. So I'm not waiting until it's changing or get less shiny or nothing like that. I right away start to work. I'm using my big brush to remove hair. That's what I did on the last few seconds. So usually I pre-dilute my paint. This paint beside the eye, which I paint on the last minute, only contains lamp black watercolor paint. The brand I don't even remember, it's not important. I'm using usually Daniel Smith or just a second, Daniel Smith or Horada, but any artist quality paint will work, I think. We will use a lot of like fur generation, which is happening right now. So if your paper is wet and you have a good diluted watercolor, diluted here I mean it's just diluted barely. So it's leaking in a little dish, but it's leaking like a honey. You don't want that diluted more. So that's what I'm using with my round brush. You can see in my hand. I think it's a quill Princeton Neptune size 6. So it's quill, not round. The round would be too small when it's numbered 6. It's a quill. But if you have a round watercolor brush, it's the normal round, the good size is around just a second, like 16 to 20, I would say. So anything bigger. And I like the Neptune because it's really fluffy. So you can see how just because the paper is wet, you can get the fur texture everywhere. It's coming. So it's not coming, it starts to come right away, but it's need time to develop. So when I'm using the big brush after I spray my paper, I make sure I make the wetness even and no puddles. But it's really wet, but no puddles. Or actually this is what I'm trying to do, no puddles. And so when you get that state, this first texture will come automatically. You don't need to do it. It's your watercolor doing it. You just need to be able to control and understand what it's doing, what will happen. So what you can see, I'm drying up around the face because that's where I don't want fur, because the face is not fluffy. The cat is fluffy, but not around the nose and a face. So there I want like a sharp line. Maybe I can suggest to do that part a little bit later because I dried up pretty well, but on a safe side you can touch it a little bit later. So until that, as you saw, I added more paint like based on the photo where there are shades or shadows, darker areas. So the whole cat is black, but you can see there are darker and lighter areas. So I'm just adding that, and I'm also leaving out white a little bit. And I let the paint close there because it will give you forms and shapes. So I'm trying not to touch where the fur look good, but I'm still adding more paint and making the watercolor blacker and darker. And I make sure the face not get furry. So I'm drying, and when I'm seeing things start to sprout, I'm removing with the clean paper towel. Mine is Kim Wipe. I introduced that in the tools and materials video, but I think you can use kitchen towel. I hope somebody will write here with experience. I'm not using kitchen towel. I'm in paper towel, but that's what I heard, and I think it can be really good because other paper products like toilet paper and stuff fall apart. They designed to fall apart, and that will be really annoying when it's falling apart and sticking to your wet paper. So I don't think it's a good idea, but kitchen towels not supposed to fall apart. So let's hope it's working well. So it's the same with the legs. So the legs are not fluffy, at least the end, the paw part, not fluffy. So there again I'm drying up, and you can pre-dry even before you put anything. You can pre-dry the paper with your paper towel, and then it will be easier to control. It's not coming out. But also leave it just a little bit wet also can have advantage because it gives you a smoother edge, and sometimes if you're lucky or you understand your paint or you have an idea, you can generate a feeling of movement with those little double lines or those gray areas. So it's just take experience to know what you want. You want really sharp edge, then dry up the paper and wait until you add those areas, or you want a little like a playfulness around, so it's just can suggest a little movement on the leg. Your eye will read like that. So it's depends on what you want to do. So still I'm trying not to retouch where I like the furriness. I'm waiting for drying around the face, so I just dried it up because there I really want sharpness, and so I just waiting and look for places where you can retouch without too much to worry. It's a pretty short painting, and I'm trying to be very simple because I hope this will be an easy tutorial, so anybody can do it with me. I'm not saying it will work right away or first time, but I think if you just follow what I'm doing, I think it will work without too much trial and error. Always look up and down, so up to your print screen of the photo or your photo if you use another photo, and down, and then you see what's happening. So what I'm doing now, I'm doing the push or cauliflower or blooming. So I'm adding more water, just water, or maybe a little bit dirty water, but just water is better than dirty water. It's just dirty because I was probably lazy to switch, or maybe I'm using another dish next to me, I'm not sure. But yeah, you can add those, and that will give spread in the black part and give body parts, like suggesting body parts when this when it's pushed and it those blooming or push back or wash back effect happens. So I'm also trying to add a little shade below the cat because again it's in a 3D space, so you don't want completely hanging. It just helps a little shade, and actually if you see the photo it's obvious there is some darkness under the cat, and it just helps to ground. My paper is enough wet to add another line, just elevate a little bit the back of the cat, and it's still blooming out beautifully. So, and you can see on the left thigh there is the pushback or blooming effect starts to take place. Trying to generate those lighter area and everywhere, like in a neck and on a tie. A little bit thinner up the tail. So I'm trying to, finally I probably had enough that it wasn't enough dry up a little bit and redraw. Sometimes you will see when watercolor dry, it get, especially the lamp black or like black overall, it's just not stay as rich as it look like in when it's wet. Many times I have that issue, but I usually just paint a layer of new black on it if I found it too light, as I did on other tutorials on Skillshare. I don't have anything like that on YouTube yet. I just wet up the paper with a large brush and I add another layer. But it's a tricky technique because you don't wanna bother the first layer. So it's you need to be very careful when you re-wet the paper. You can only re-wet once with a very nice smooth brush and not massage it too much, because then a first layer definitely will come up. Also with watercolor, what you put down it won't be like that. So especially in a wet on wet technique. So it's changed a lot during the process, if it's wet on wet especially. So that's what only experience can give you, to kind of anticipate correctly what will happen. And I'm not saying it's easy, it's not easy at all, and I'm not saying I know, because it's not true. I just have a lot of experience, but it's not means I will know for sure. I think it's getting to the point when I have to stop. I also told this many times, with watercolor, stopping is not easy to get the right time point. It's, at least for me, it's always, I have a feeling, oh, I need to retouch this and that, but there is a point when it's just getting worse. Honestly, it's just usually there is a point when it's not worth it. There is a point when it's fresh, and it's just worth to be strong. And when you like it, when you have everything on place and you like it, don't try to correct every little thing or redo every little thing, because it will lose its freshness. And at least this is my experience. I have the good sharp edge on a face. I have the good furry edge on a back and a tail. The legs are enough sharp for me. I have the ratios right. So yeah, just need to be strong and stop. So I'm adding the salt. It's exactly the right time. So when you have semi-dry paint, which is, if you would touch with your finger, it will color your finger, but it's not shiny anymore. That's the point. Okay, be very careful. Salt is developing so strong by time. Just don't add that much. I did. Just learn from my mistake. Just add a little bit, just tiny bit, just on the top of the back and the top of the head and the tail maybe. Don't add everywhere. It's stupid. You can see it's too much. So, okay, after salt, you just wait until everything dry. It can be the next morning. Salt is hygroscopic. I don't know how to say this word. It's binding the water, so it will dry so much slower. So you just really wait until it's entirely dry, and then you remove the salt and remove the masking fluid. Just, I use my hand, as you can see. You can use a brush for the salt, a dry big rough hair brush for the salt. But so now I am going into a few details after I remove the masking fluid. So I'm shaping out the eye a little bit, and that's the only point I add a little color. I add a little yellowish green, I think, to the eye, and that's it. But actually you can keep black and white, and you can add just a little gray, a little dirty water. I like to grade the start point of the whiskers because it's usually just look very unnatural and too white, and I just add a little, like, again, dirty water actually, so just to remove that paper whiteness. It when it's dry, it will be completely visible. It's not like you remove it entirely with the black paint. It just get it a little bit grayer. I also add some paint here and there, make it darker. Also, you can skip the salt part entirely if you like the painting. Maybe it's just worth it to not force it further with the salt. It's just normal kitchen salt, small crystals. If you're not familiar with the salt and what it's doing, just take your lamp black paint, make a layer and test it out. You will be surprised how strong the salt effect when it's develop. It's take sometimes until it's wet, it's still developing. So probably it's developed for maybe the large part, the majority develop in the first, I don't know, 10 minutes. You really need to test this out. Maybe if you want to play with it, it's worth to test it out, I think. But it can develop further even, and you cannot remove it until the paper is wet because it will just be it's a complete mess. That black painted salt crystals just go on a white area. It's totally won't work. So I'm using my tin pen, size small. It's a Faber-Castell Pit Artist Pen Black, size small. That's what I usually use a little bit if I need to put down details. It's really similar to watercolor, so it's if I need a few lines, that's what I use. And of course signature, because I had a lot of issue and I forgot to sign things and I sent it out and people was not happy, so I just learned. I always just routinely sign everything. Even if I'm not selling it. So you can add a little color into the eye. And that's it. It can be without color too. If you are a purist, just stay black and white. So I'm playing more with the eye shape. I try to make it a little bit narrowing. I think the eye should, same way as the whisker, turn down a little bit. Cannot stay just very bright white. Adding some whisker on the other side where the negative white whisker did not work, so just some very light lines. So now I'm trying to still playing with the the shape, but also adding some darkness above. And try to like wipe the edge not to generate line. It's just hard to stop. I think this is it. And of course now it's leaking in too much. So when you add the darkness, just for the eye itself, not the pupil, it's better if it's not, if it's dry around, because it will suck the paint particles from the outside. But it needs some darkness. I don't want to leave it like super bright white. Anyway, here is the end. I hope you liked it and you will come back for more, and check out my Skillshare tutorials too.